Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Omega Metroid podcast from OmegaMetroid.com. My name is Andy Spiteri, joined once again by Gooey Fame. Goo, how are you?
Oh, I'm doing pretty good. Thanks for having me.
Of course, this
Oh,
is
geez,
a
I was
this is a
so
nice
excited I
little
knocked
sub
my
series we got going
desk
on.
over. Yes, it's been great actually. It's perfect actually because I recently watched all the Alien movies and now I'm like revisiting them again. And I don't know, it's been interesting, especially now that we're getting into the territories of movies that I haven't
Yes,
seen a million times, you know?
yes, yeah, exactly. I've seen Alien so many times. I've seen Aliens enough times where I could tell you the almost beat by beat that movie. But I had not seen Alien 3 and the next Alien movie too, by the way. I think I've only watched them once ever in my entire
Yeah.
life. So I was
I
stoked.
honestly Yeah, I think I only had seen this once, like recently, and that I don't think I've ever seen it like at all.
Yeah, and so I guess so we're obviously we're doing Alien in review, and today we're going to be talking about Alien 3, which was directed by David Fincher. You know, I was trying to think of some other like big time franchises that had like pretty big entries that each were directed by a different like director, and maybe you could think of some, but I obviously Terminator came to mind, but I couldn't think of a
Well,
whole other like series like that.
oh man, I don't know. Now that I'm just thinking off the top of my head, I guess not, because Terminator, like I think of as like the first it being like two James Cameron movies,
Yeah,
and then kind of yeah it the other people from there on out. But yeah, these are
yeah,
so
I guess
far.
yeah.
You
Yeah.
could say with certain franchises there have been some with standouts, but I guess what's interesting about Alien is like these three are like really noteworthy, like revered directors. The first three movies here.
Yeah, and actually, even the director of the four. I don't want to talk too much about Alien Resurrection, but the director of that movie also made what the heck is that movie called?
Amelie.
Amelie, yeah, which is like a cult classic. So like, got some pretty good talent behind her. But yeah, so David Fincher, very prolific director. I really like David Fincher's movies, actually, like a lot.
Hmm.
I'm a big Fight Club fan. I'm a big Benjamin Button fan. I like The Social Network. There's probably tons more that he's done that I'm just, not thinking of off the top of my head. But I really like
Right.
him, so it's kind of like cool to come back and see this movie and revisit some of the some of like the early formations. Like there was some stuff in there where I was just like, oh, like that feels like very David Fincher to me, which I really love. So yeah, I'm very excited to get talking about Alien 3. This is actually like one of my favorite subseries that we do on the show, this Alien in Review, kind of because it just feels like an extension of Virtual Theater, which, by the
Yes.
way, is a podcast about video game movies and the stories that shape them. And so I know that we have our own Patreon on Omega Metroid, but I do want to plug really, really quickly, okay? If you've got a singular dollar to spare, we got a Patreon over on Virtual Theater, and like there is like an absurd amount of bonus shows that are over there, like bonus shows about random movies, random like stuff that we like, but also there's like series where we reviewed every episode of the Zelda cartoon, every episode of Captain N, and maybe Goo, you can enlighten all of our Omega Metroid listeners about what's next.
Well, we just launched last week our new series called Banana Slamma, which is we're watching through the Donkey Kong Country cartoon show
Yes.
that many people may recall. And yeah, it's up there. It's for $1, and we've just done the first episode,
Yeah.
but I mean, it's awesome.
I,
It's
I
really
came into
fun.
this immediately before recording this podcast. Before Goo jumped in, we're recording an ad for Banana Slammer, and I was kind of tickled trying to do my best cranky Kong voice. So I entered this podcast like in a good mood, ready to go.
We're
Um,
voice actors now.
yeah, and good ones too.
Yeah.
We should be getting paid $4,000 a session. Anyways, so yeah, so we're gonna dive deep into Alien 3, and talk about all the things about this movie. I think that one thing that perhaps we could mention, I didn't really delve into this a lot, but like one thing about this movie that I think is maybe like the predominant thing that people talk about is it had a very, very troubled production. And I didn't really research a ton into it, but I know that it went through a lot of directors. They built sets, like spent a lot of money building sets for stuff that was like rewritten out of the script. So they were kind of like trying to like rewrite the script to include the stuff that they already built, even if it didn't necessarily fit. The whole production sounded like a complete mess. And actually, to this day, I don't think that David Fincher really acknowledges this movie. He kind of like washed his hands of it and said like, see ya.
Yeah, and it kind of shows a little bit like there's definitely a lot of like imperfections and like little flaws in the movie. And yeah, with David Fincher, that's what makes it interesting is because you mentioned like you see his style in the movie for sure. Like it does really feel a lot of times like one of his movies. It's his first feature length film after being pretty well renowned, director of music videos and stuff, but you can see his DNA, but you also kind of see like there's stuff that just shows like that, oh, this is kind of half baked a little bit. And I think it's worth noting that we watched like the assembly cut.
Yes, that was my next point.
Oh, okay, yeah, basically what that is, it's like it's not a director's cut, but it's closer to his original vision, so it's a little bit longer.
Yeah. Think of it along the lines of like Zack Snyder's Justice League. So there was like Justice League, and I haven't actually seen Zack Snyder's Justice League. I saw the first one; it was awful.
Oh, you gotta see it; it's cool. This is a little different in that he came back and like they spent a bunch of money and finished it. Whereas this is them trying to like cobble together something that resembles it. So that definitely comes across in the movie that it's like this is a little all over the place, a little slapped together, but then from what I'm imagining, because I've never actually seen the theatrical version, I'm thinking,
I don't remember it at all.
It's like much shorter. It's like over a half an hour shorter, and there was a lot of stuff they cut. And I can definitely see, if you've seen that, it feeling like what is this movie? You know what I mean? Like some of the stuff they cut feels like it fleshes things out a lot more.
I agree.
So I can see how it gets its sort of reputation. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I agree. So yeah, very important to note that if you are familiar with Alien 3, we're reviewing the assembly cut, so not the theatrical release. And there is actually like some like significant plot differences, and it's not just like an extended cut with like deleted scenes. Like there's different stuff that happened. Like for example, the Xenomorph in the theatrical version comes out of a dog, whereas in this version it comes out of an ox. And I tried to write down some changes that I thought might be confusing, but there's probably a bunch that I didn't get to. But yeah, so we did do this version, and I will say there were some scenes that I can understand why they were maybe chopped out, even if I actually like quite liked them. But we'll talk about them as we get to that. But yeah, I do think it's very important to note that this is the assembly cut. So if you're like listening to us review this movie, you're like, what the hell are these guys talking about? That is what we're doing here. So I guess the very first thing that I noticed, like I guess I should say the very first thing, but one of my main takeaways after this movie was over, and I figure we'll start here just to kind of get it out of the way. But I think that you could absolutely watch Alien, and you could watch Aliens, and you could say like that was, there was a lot of elements from these movies that the Metroid series took and worked into its mythos and worked those themes into their games. And I don't know that you could really say a whole lot or I don't know that you could say the same about Alien 3. Like I watched this movie, and there are some elements where I think that it kind of is sort of like Metroid a little bit, but more so just kind of like they happen to be sharing the same ideas rather than like Metroid saw that and was like, that's a great idea, or that's a great theme, or a great something that we can build upon. I know you're actually like not a seasoned Metroid player, let's just say.
Yeah.
But to me, that was one of my main takeaways, save for a couple points, which I'll point out as we get to in this movie.
Yeah, and that makes sense to me because the first two are iconic, probably so much more inspirational
Yeah.
to a lot of people, whereas this one's kind of it's got a mixed bag
Yeah.
response. So, yeah,
So that is just to say, I mean, plus two, like this comes out what, 92, 93 or something like that. So
yeah,
we
something
already
like that.
have kind of like the foundation for Metroid at this point.
Metroid's already there. Yeah.
Yeah. So that is to say that I think it's probably fair to say to our listeners, from this point forward, Alien in Review is really going to be about Alien in Review versus Alien and how it inspired Metroid. I think that's probably a fair
Mhm.
point to make. And you know, to anybody that I've never met a Metroid fan that doesn't really like Alien, but I don't know, just throwing that out there for everybody. So this is really where it starts to become Alien instead of like Alien and Metroid in the same kind of vein. So wanted to throw that out there before we kind of really get going here on this movie. Um, so yeah, there we go. Okay, so we're gonna talk obviously full spoilers. So if you're like Goo and I and you haven't seen this movie in forever, you should watch it and watch the assembly cut because I thought it was really great. But let's start off at the beginning of the movie. One of the most controversial things about this movie is that the happy ending of Aliens is completely undone. And Newt and Hicks are killed, and they're killed like off screen. And I think that a lot of people were upset. I can understand that. I think that I think it does feel cheap. I've read that some people say like it kind of cheapens the end of Aliens and it kind of gets you off on a, I don't know, like a wrong foot or something. And I kind of agree with that. Like it is a cheap way to get rid of them. But I think that my big takeaway from this movie, Goo, and I don't know if you agree or not, but like remember when we were doing Aliens and I made the comment like, you know, the story of this movie seems like completely logical, like a completely logical follow-up to what would happen in Alien. I think that
Mhm.
this movie is going for like the complete opposite of that. It's like actively trying to disorientate you and like just keep you like on your toes, and it's like it's very much more like a horror movie like the first one, but in a different like psychological kind of way where it's just like everything that you expect or that makes sense almost feels like nope, like
Yeah,
it doesn't happen.
that felt very David Fincher like a little bit.
Yeah.
I definitely agree. Like tonally, it does feel closer to the original, maybe because it does feel a little bit more horror-y in that. Like the original does have a slightly more, I don't want to say like slightly cynical tone, like like more in line with a lot of horror movies. Whereas, yeah, like the second one is a James Cameron movie, which I feel like are always very like romantic. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like they're inspiring and stuff like that. So I think I think it actually fits and has its own unique tone and everything. And I don't know. I have a hard time like I almost view it as like it's okay. Like it doesn't matter if you don't like it. The second one's like this. Like this is almost just like
Hmm.
its own movie. You know what I mean? The original one's still there, and it's still, or the second one is still, mint. And that's kind of how I felt about Aliens a little bit. Like, okay, it's different and it's a different tone, but like, look, it doesn't ruin the first movie if you don't like it. So I don't know. I don't
Yeah.
know. I'm okay with it existing.
Yeah. I like I I do think that it is a little bit it's kind of cheap to have him die off screen, but I think that there's a purpose for it. Like it's not like they do it for no reason. And I think that
Yeah.
like it feels like really devastating because like you've grown attached to these characters in the last movie and like especially Newt to like she's 10 years old or whatever and
Hmm.
it's just like it feels devastating and but it is for a purpose like I said and I think that what this movie wants to do like often during here during the course of this film which there's a couple instances of this is like the word I kept coming back to is like it wants you to be disorientated and kind of like
Hmm.
what's going on, where am I, and I kind of like that because it's a different kind of vibe than the first two. Like the first one was a very classic horror movie, the second one was kind of a more action suspense kind of movie, and this one kind of felt like I said earlier, kind of like almost psychological horror, so like different in a way.
Yeah, it kind of wanted you to feel some of the
Yeah,
pain, some of the struggle, and so I don't know. I think it actually like fits with what's going on in the rest of the movie. I agree with you.
yeah, and actually, I really really dug the like opening credits. Like I thought that was really
Oh
well
yeah,
done, and that was like classic Fincher. Like the way it was like quick cuts of like really crazy stuff happening and like back deep into space and like more quick cuts and like it didn't show you too much, but it showed you like hints of what happened and like I thought that was like really really well done, like very cool. I was sitting there like actually mesmerized on my couch.
there's a lot of like cool shots like that throughout the movie. I feel like
Um,
really it ratchets up like tension like that.
yeah, and so this intro, by the way, was I believe extended in the assembly cut. So I think you got a bit of it in the theatrical version, but it does kind of, like I said, it doesn't spell out what happened on the ship and to Hicks and to Newt, but it kind of gives you enough where it doesn't feel like as cheap because you do get to see kind of sort of what happened, and at least you're not like completely caught off guard. So
Yeah,
I thought it was cool.
well, that's I think what's worth pointing out is I feel like the movie's trying to disorient you, but like I also feel like you can follow what's happening. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it sort of actually reminds this is maybe some people think not a good comparison, but it actually sort of reminded me of BVS in that
Okay.
like I saw that in theaters and I was like, what is this? Like this is kind of stupid. I don't know what's going on. And then I don't know, I watched that, the extended edition of that and it's like they cut out things that like make it make sense a little bit from it like that where you can actually follow the story better and as opposed to like in the original. And I feel like that's probably what's going on here. Like I'm imagining seeing this movie for the first time back when it comes out, and like it seems like maybe it's got everything in there, but I feel like it's probably like just logically probably makes a little bit more sense if you have the added context that they put in
Yeah.
there.
No, I totally agree. Um, so one thing that I noticed, actually, like fairly early on into this movie, and I think it was a good thing, but I think that the visual effects, particularly like in space, were much improved, and as they should be because it's been 8 years since the last movie or whatever. But there was a lot of shots of like planets and stuff like that that looked very cool, and there was the Xeno itself, like the Xenomorph itself, looked pretty good while not looking like too goofy or like CGI esque. I thought it
There
was a
was
nice blend.
there are certain parts where it it looked like dated a little bit more. It did not like some of the Xeno stuff looked like I don't know. I felt like it doesn't. That's where I was seeing some of the flaws compared to. I thought like the camera and effects like feel like very pristine. You know what
Mm,
I mean? Very like polished. Whereas like there was times like this. I don't know if it was because it was some of the cuts might have been like not actually in the original movie.
right.
Stuff like that. But there were a couple moments where it was like, oh boy. But it was never like where it was like I can't believe they like released this or anything.
Yeah.
Just
There are some
yeah.
moments where the special effects look horrible, like
Yeah.
horrible. But I like for the most part, the ones that stuck out to me, I thought outer space looked very good, and I
Yeah,
thought
the
that
like the
the
opening
Xenomorph
titles.
looked good and he moved good
Mhm.
because it was kind of like a
Yeah.
different kind of Xenomorph as well. All right, so let's give you the lowdown of what's happening in this movie here. So Ripley's ship, after escaping, the name of the planet is LV-426, with Hicks and with Newt, is has crashed on this planet, which houses a maximum security prison, and unfortunately, everyone dies except for Ripley. So Ripley finds herself on Fiorina. Is that how you say it?
Yeah, it's something like that. I
Something
don't know
like
how to
that.
pronounce it.
The
Yeah.
planet's name is Fiorina, but everyone calls it Fury, and it's got the prison there,
Mhm.
and it's it's kind of like a cool setting actually, because this part kind of sort of did remind me of a Metroid game in a sense that like there's lots of Metroid games that are like you're confined to like this one specific location, like the BSL in Metroid Fusion or the bottle ship in Other M or whatever, right? Like there's lots of instances where I feel like you were trapped in like this labyrinth kind of place, and that was something that did kind of give me Metroid vibes. But I think that actually the creepiest thing about this planet is there's like it's not it kind of is a cult, but not really. It's like all the prisoners
yeah.
all the prisoners, so there's it's all male. It's like it's a planet full of males. All of them, with the exception of a couple, are prisoners, and all of them have turned to religion to kind of move on with their lives.
Specifically, it used to be like a full maximum security prison.
Yes.
And like Wayland was operating like mining there, and then they shut it down, and like a dozen prisoners were like, we want to stay behind, and they were like, yeah, sure, and so they left them there with like 2 guards. So I think that is what made it it probably just made the production of the movie easier. There's less people, but it kind of made it feel even more like it's even more dingy, because it's just like a bunch of stragglers who are just here because they've got this weird religion. They also, throughout the movie, they talk about how, like, yes, it was a maximum security prison, but since it's been abandoned and, like, this company is not, like, really looking after these people, like, nothing functions, you know what I mean?
So not even the batteries and the flashlight works. Like, nothing works here.
Yeah, I love that. That was, like, that, like, made it next level to me,
It was kind of, like, appropriate, because you gotta think at this point, like, the film itself is getting no more money because of how much money's been wasted, so it's just like, hey, let's turn it into a plot element. So I kind of like that, actually.
And this actually reminded me how, so we were talking about how each one is like kind of its own unique thing, that each movie in the trilogy so far, so much so that like people might not like certain aspects about the second or the third one. But here I was sort of thinking about how, even though they're all super distinct, I think they do a good job of continuing like themes and elements from each previous movie.
Yeah.
And I thought this was sort of doing that too, because I was thinking back to the first one, different setting, but it's like a group of workers like basically being completely screwed over in space by the company they work for. And now we're seeing like this old disheveled like prison colony, ran by like the same company essentially, and how it's just like a kind of peek into like the world. Like I love how they've handled like Earth in Alien so far, of how little we've seen and what we have seen. It's sort of like this, it seems to be like this dystopia, but we don't fully know everything about it. But I don't know, it fits in the world of Alien really well, I think.
Yeah, I agree. I think like maybe the logical thing to do after Aliens, if you were to ask like a random fan, like what's the logical next step, they would have probably said like Ripley goes and confronts Weyland-Yutani, and like there's a big war or something like that to get rid of him. And I kind of did love, like, after it settled, I was like, we're on some random rock on the far corners of the universe, like who knows where, and like. Yeah, so I do think that, like, it definitely feels unique, but I do think that, particularly, like, Ripley and, like, what a great job Sigourney Weaver does, and we'll talk more about her later, definitely kind of helps hold it all together with a couple of the themes that run through the series. But, yeah, like, you're right, another good, solid theme running through here is, like, everyone is expendable. Like, the regular person is expendable to the corporation, and, like, some people in this movie refuse to believe it and, pay big time for it. Which has been a consistent thread in every single movie.
Yes, and with these like prisoners and stuff, they get to introduce. There's like a whole new like thematic thing to hang its hat on. Its thematic hat.
I think that the prisoners are like kind of creepy in and of itself too, because I think they're like very relevant to like today. In that, like, and I don't want to get onto like any kind of soapboxes here about society, but like, it seems it's kind of hinted that a lot of these prisoners are there because they have like aggression towards women specifically, and like what would you would call them,
Well,
incels, I guess, in today's vernacular.
yeah, some definitely like that's the
A
main
majority of them.
vibe they get. I
Yeah.
think they sort of present that not all of them are there for that, but the fact that they've been isolated there
Right. So it's
has heightened any sort of feelings, so
so
yeah.
it's like you've got predominant, I mean, it's all male, and like a lot of them had violent tendencies against women, and some of them have like legitimately bettered themselves through this religion, and some of them haven't. But like it is kind of creepy because you introduce this element of like, part of their quote unquote recovery is like the complete absence of women from their life. So when Ripley comes in, it's like a complete maybe it kind of is their fault. It's kind of not, like, in a way, because
That's what I think partially, like, to go into like talking about society a little bit, is that I think part of it is that like the like rehabilitation is not going to come by making these guys go do slave labor on some crappy mining planet somewhere. And I think that you can kind of look at you can draw comparisons to like the prison system or whatever, like, is that even rehabilitative? And so sure, some of them manage to sort of, I don't know. I think even you can see like the good that like weird religion has done for them, but I think even in this movie you can sort of see like this is not really, locking these guys up and having them start a little cult isn't gonna save anybody. It's not gonna help anyone.
Yeah, so I kind of think of it like Ripley coming just really kind of exposed the facade and like reverted these guys back to their true nature, which I feel like is kind of creepy and like kind of,
Yes.
Again, like there's lots of scenes in this movie where, actually throughout the series really, where like it's body horror, and like you're specifically Ripley or like women in here are getting violated, and like in no more pronounced than in this movie several times. So it's very
that's
creepy.
what made it feel closer to the first one, because I feel like in the second one's a little more tender. It's like mom versus mom.
Kind of, yeah, kind of.
Whereas this one is more back to like, it's like a lot more nihilistic, I feel like and I feel like the best way that comes across is that like she is treated as like an intrusion just by like existing there. You know what I mean? Like it wasn't her choice to come, and they're like, yeah, don't walk around here, and it's like, well, hold on, fella.
Yeah, and like the messed up thing is like they weren't wrong about Ripley. Like her being there completely did disrupt the population. But it's very, I found it very unsettling because it did remind me of like people that exist on like the deep dark corners of the internet today, that what I mean, just and it was like, man, like I could see this in 1,000 years, like some prison in the Andromeda galaxy that houses whatever. So yeah, that kind of stuck out to me as actually kind of an extra layer on top of this. We have this creepy setting, and we have this, obviously we know that we're gonna have a xenomorph on the loose here, but I was as concerned about this cult as I was the alien, and I think rightfully so.
Yeah, and they got to be. There was some. I liked how the movie handled it. There was some like shades of gray in there a little bit, where some of them like you identified with, and you were like, oh, this guy, he's trying his best to be a good person or whatever, and then some of them were just like the world's biggest monsters. You know what I mean?
That's what I mean. Like I think some of them legitimately bettered themselves through maybe not this religion, but through the scenario or whatever, right? Like they were trying to be better. We'll talk about
maybe I would not even say maybe better themselves, but maybe they found a way to make peace with themselves. You know what I mean?
Yeah, sure. Like I want to talk about the characters in a little bit. Like I love Dylan. He was awesome. And he's kind of the ringleader of this group, but I thought he was fantastic. But not everyone kind of rose to that, and some people, unfortunately just reverted back to type. So So we actually, and I should mention too. So there is a scene where Ripley is told that everyone that she traveled with has passed away, and there is this unreal autopsy scene where Ripley demands that they cut open Newt because she sees evidence of the Xenomorph on her escape pod. There's like the acid or whatever. This was like a very uncomfortable, like intense scene, and really good, I thought.
It was sad, and she like, just like the fact that she didn't want to. It did that good. Like you had that psychological element of like she didn't want to fully reveal like what had happened.
Yeah,
you know what I mean. You couldn't tell like, is she just freaking out type situation, because she did, like, she literally just woke up from this whole experience and now she's thrown back into this. So yeah, that was played very well.
And again, just very violating to Newt. To I mean, of course, it's passed on, but still, like, just it felt, it was very intense. And that was the word I came back to. Was just like, man. And then actually, shout out to, we all know how great Sigourney Weaver is. She's incredible. But I thought that Charles Dancer was doing awesome work. And we'll talk about him later. But he was bringing it, I thought.
Like, I was thinking like not. We'll get more into the characters, I know, but not every character like fully worked for me. But in this beginning part here, where they were like kind of setting up the interplay between all these characters and their connections, like I thought it was really strong. Like I really loved like their whole exchange they were having. You know, like how he's suspicious of her. You know what I mean? It all worked really well.
Yeah, I loved when he's like, well, because I'm not a complete idiot and this disease has been gone for 200 years.
Cholera or whatever.
Yeah, I thought that was great.
I was thinking, like, how long was she frozen or whatever?
Yeah, I don't know.
Because I know, like, even in the first and the second one, there's some time gap. But I was thinking, like, did she say cholera because she's been, like, out of touch so long? Because that was... in the beginning of Aliens, it was about how she's been gone, and her
like
daughter
60
was
years.
like 6. Yeah, so okay, that makes sense. When I first watched it, I was like, wait, like, she's freaking out, right? And no, it makes sense. Like cholera, that'd be a thing she'd guess, and I don't know.
You know, there's a time jump in the next movie of 200 years. So
yes,
we'll see. Spoilers for Alien Resurrection. By the way, it's worth mentioning too, in the assembly cut, I didn't know that this wasn't part of the theatrical cut, but there's this incredible scene of them picking up Ripley from like the ship, and like she's got like this makeup on that makes her look like almost like a bronze statue, and it's supposed to be like ash and whatever from the crash. It's an awesome shot. It looks awesome. It looks so good, actually.
The autopsy shots were cool too. They had some of these were reminding me of David Fincher, like some of the gritty crime movies, and there's like the close-ups of the the bloody thing, and I was like, ooh boy. you could feel the style in there. A little touch.
This next scene was awesome. So so as it turns out, a Xenomorph did in fact cause their pod to crash, but it is not inside Newt, but rather inside a ginormous ox named Babe, who passes away. And this scene, this was so, like, there's so many awesome scenes. Like, they're intercutting a scene between, like, Dylan, the leader of the cult, is holding a funeral for Newt and saying how, like, even in death, new life can begin. And at this, like, they're cutting in shots of, like, this ox, and the chest burster coming out of the ox, and, like, as he's saying, like, new life's coming out, the Xenomorph hatches, and it was like, this is wicked. This is, I was really digging Alien 3 at this point.
Here I was starting to think about how this is, like, actually, I feel like some of the DNA of Prometheus. And, like,
kind of.
the new style, because they, like, now they've really leaned into some of, like, the big, like, questions of existence and religion. So, like, just, it's more of, like, the imagery, you know what I mean? But, like, the androids in the new ones are talking about, like, the creator and stuff like that. And I was like, dang, this is, like, you feel that here. I feel like they had to have drawn a little bit from, like, some of this imagery.
Oh, it was awesome. It was an awesome sequence. It was like every shot was cool. Like, it just, like, the quick cuts, I feel like, really, again, disorientating. Like it's like you're kind of going back and forth. I loved it. This might have been one of my favorite sequences in the movie. And there we go.
I was thinking here too how it was like this is pretty novel again. Like it's back to there's just like one alien, you know?
Yes.
Or like there's two. This is actually aliens. There's two aliens technically, I guess, in the movie.
Yeah, well, I guess so. Yeah.
Well, yeah.
Technically.
But it was like back it is more back to basics a little bit, you know, but in a unique way.
Yeah, no, I actually, that's a great point that you make. Like, they are building up this singular xenomorph, and it's important to note too, there are no weapons on this rock.
We find
because it's a prison. Late. Yeah. So there you go. So yeah, we got a xenomorph on the loose, and you know what that means. It's time for some kills, and I was pretty impressed with some of the early kills in this movie.
There's some good ones, yeah.
So the second one, so not the very, very first one, but the second one where this Xeno, he like completely rips this guy and the other one gets blood like all over his face. I was like, oh man, that is intense.
That was awesome. Yeah.
I want to talk about something else before I get to this. The other one was amazing too, but there is a scene. Maybe I wasn't paying attention. You can help me understand, Goo. So there's a scene between Clemens and Andrews. Andrews is like the guy that he's the warden basically. Clemens is the doctor. And Andrews is saying like this Ripley cannot interact with the general population because she's a female and will upset them. And he's not wrong. And then like Clemens just lets Ripley go eat lunch with them. I was just like, what happened to not like letting her, I don't know. Did I just miss something?
Well, the way I sort of thought about it was that there's not guards there. You know what I mean? Like what are they, you know, I
guess so.
Like, I guess they could have held her at gunpoint or whatever, but it seemed more of like, yeah, they should try to avoid this, but she was her
like whatever
going fuck that, you know, and it's like, well, what are they gonna do?
Yeah,
you know.
Yeah, so I was watching that and I was like, oh, I thought we weren't doing that, and like this doesn't seem like a good idea, but whatever. If Ripley can handle a bunch of aliens, then I'm sure she can handle these blokes.
I thought that was great when she's like, I forgot when she talks to the leader guy, and he's like, you should stay away. She's like, no, I'm gonna sit by you.
Yeah, I'm gonna eat my lunch. All right, so here we go. The Xeno he's in control now, so he's just starting his rampage, and he gets a great kill on Clemens, who I was very sad to see go, actually, because I did like him a lot. And but yeah, he has the little thing that comes out of his mouth and it's like explodes his head, and it's just like,
oh my god, damn. Yeah, that was a really good that was a great one. There was some pretty cool like effects here.
Yes, I think these were the two best kills of the movie, I have to say, the first two.
And it feels like I guess we have been talking about it for a while, but like Clemens at this point has had like this whole character arc. That's another thing where it feels like less you know, not romantic in the romance sense, but less romantic in the, you know, the Cameron-y way of like, this guy who she's like growing this affection for, sort of, is like taken out like halfway into the movie, you know what I mean?
And she very quick, like, that's the thing about Ripley over the course of these movies, is like she doesn't really have time to emotionally process anything, because it's just like, I need to stay alive right here, right now. Which is kind of a little bit too bad that they don't explore that a little bit more. They kind of do in Aliens, but it would be nice, or it would be interesting to see, like, what does this do to a person? And I guess we'll obviously never know, but one thing that I thought was even more intense than that kill was like the scene where the Xeno goes over and sniffs Ripley and like ultimately spares her. And I think that's like the big part of the movie that everybody remembers, is like the Xeno getting right up in her face and she's crying. Also, she's got a shaved head, by the way. And it's not because she's in prison, it's because she had lice. But
yes, which I think that's not in the theatrical release.
I don't know if it is or not.
I read they cut that line out, and I'm like, okay, so in the movie she just shows up and she's like, I guess I
Unshaved
better
head.
shave my head. Yeah.
I just assumed it's because she was in a prison, right?
Well,
Like,
she wasn't a prisoner. They were just holding on to her till they come
yeah,
and pick her up, you know.
like I said, I mean, I think I watched this when I was like 14, so it's been some years. So I was just like, oh yeah, she's out of prison. She's a prisoner. She got her head shaved. That makes sense.
I was like,
But
will
no,
it
it's
make
just
the
lice.
guys will make the guys like less randy if she looks more like a guy? I don't know.
I don't know. I don't
That's
think
what I
so.
thought. But then, yeah, then you notice there's that one line about lice, and you're like, ah, lice.
Makes sense.
I think
They do
also
show
just
a
because
lot
it
of lice
looks.
in the movie.
I think really it's just it gives the movie like a kind of a cool, unique look. Like everyone's freaking bald in the movie. I think it's cool. Like
Um,
visually, I think it's cool.
yeah. So Ripley is spared, and it's
Mhm.
intense, very intense. Um, but yeah, just so again, I keep coming back to this word, but like the movie is it's trying to disorientate you because very quickly you've killed off Clemens, who is kind of like your main support guy and whatever. Like even in the first movie, like the captain Dallas, he made it to like pretty much the end of the
Right.
movie. And in the
Yeah.
second movie, obviously Hicks and Newt get out with Ripley. In this movie, Clemens is gone right away, and then is immediately followed by Andrews, who's the warden, who's like kind of he's kind of like positioned to be like a somewhat antagonist to Ripley in this movie, or you think he's going to be, but he's just like done, killed.
Yeah. Yeah, and then it's like his sidekick becomes in charge, and like before where he was just like a guy with a couple lines in the background, now he's the main character.
Yeah,
And I could see how that could be like weird for some people. I liked it. I immediately was like, I went from like not really caring too much about him to being like, oh, like this guy, like what's gonna happen with him? Like I
yeah,
immediately got invested in him. I thought the actor was really good, and it's another part where you see like maybe sometimes it's just like this is us doing the thing we do in all the movies, but like I like this continuing idea of like uh the struggle to like maintain authority in a situation like this, because in each movie it's like it always falls apart, and then Ripley always has to like put
hmm
everything back together, you know, like she basically has to like take charge. And I don't know, like I thought that was done really well here of like how she like
yeah.
kind of wrangled, like it wasn't even like everyone started working together and stuff like that. I thought that was pretty interesting.
It definitely reached a point where, and I think that you see this in every Alien movie, where it's just like let go of whatever like hierarchy or rules that you thought we had, because everything's changed now with the arrival of this alien. It's changed everything, and like if you want to survive, you have to kind of give that up and work together, right? And I kind of like that as well.
Especially because on top of that, the messages they always are getting from Mother or
Yeah.
Wayland or whatever is clearly like
Acknowledge request.
they don't care. So
No.
like you need to not listen to authority. I feel like that is like the overall message of all these movies.
You hear that, kids? All right. So in this cut, in the assembly cut, there is an extra subplot that is not in the theatrical version, and this I would dare say is the bulk of the extra half-hour runtime. And it is a plot that involves the prisoners trapping the xenomorph, which they do. And there's a prisoner, and his name is Golik, and he's
Mhm.
kind of he's not all upstairs, and he sees this xenomorph. Actually, so he sees his two teammates get killed by the xenomorph and goes nuts, as maybe you would expect if you saw that. But then once they have him captured, and they kind of get this elaborate plot together in order to capture him, he kind of develops like a god complex with it, where he thinks it's some like deity or something like that, and he's like, I need to see it one more time. And of course, the xenomorph kills him
He lets
immediately,
it out.
and
Yeah.
he lets it out, which is kind of frustrating as a viewer, because you're just like, like what are you thinking? What are you doing? Um, and I can
I think
understand why
they
they cut it, because they kind of have two similar plots in this movie where they try and wrangle the Xeno into like a trap. But I did like that this
yes,
kind of
yeah.
fleshed out like Golik and Dylan, and gave gave some of the other prisoners like something to do a little bit more before they just like died.
I thought it was, yeah, I thought it was an interesting enough character. Like, they do hint early on, like, there's a guys talking, and they're like, I don't want to do this shift with him anymore. Like, they
Yeah.
plant that, like, oh, he's, like, definitely the one to look out for, the whole time. So I like, think the character is interesting, but yeah, I just think as far as, like, how it all went with them trapping them, and I just thought, too, like, that sequence wasn't really that good. Like, I was kind of checking out a little bit when they're like, it's all a bunch of, it's like a lot of the prisoners that I didn't really care about,
Mm.
like doing some plot to capture it. And I think that was, it's sort of interesting, but it just wasn't really portrayed that well. And that's where it stood out, where I was thinking of like some of the exciting sequences of aliens. And I'm like, this doesn't
Right.
hold a candle to that. I felt like it was better when when like it was more character driven and like horror driven, and like this wasn't trying to be like a big action set piece, but it wasn't like, it was definitely trying to be like a big thrilling moment, and I feel like it just didn't work. It was just like, oh, they're going through doors and shutting them, and
No,
I
no, no,
don't
no.
know.
That's later in the movie, and I agree with you.
Oh, is it?
Yeah,
Okay.
this is
Yeah, well,
before.
I was thinking when it leads to where they
Yes.
right before they capture him, and
Yeah,
I
so
don't
this is
know.
the first time that they kept. I was gonna say because I want to come back to that and contrast the first moment against the second, and I
Uh-huh.
completely agree with you. Let's just talk about it now. So like let's skip ahead. So the first time that they capture the Xeno, and I guess like this is why I can see why it was cut, is because like you had the one scene where like they trap it and then Golik lets it free and then they have to retrap it again. So it's kind of a little bit redundant. But I think that the
Yeah.
scene where they trap it the first time is actually better because they kind of have this plan where it's like, let's lure it into this, I don't know what it was, like a fridge or something like that. And one
Yeah.
guy kind of like basically sacrifices himself, runs away in order
Yes.
to lure it into there. And so it was kind of cool like that. At least you got like some character development out of that.
Mhm.
But yeah, so the second time that they lure it, it's very weird and it's very hard to follow what's going on, like very confusing and not well shot, I don't think. Where what they're essentially trying to do is like there's all these pipes and there's all these like different passageways that you can take, and they're trying to shut off the doors to funnel the alien into one specific section, and like it's I think it's like impossible to follow. Actually, I watched it. I was like, "What the hell are they doing? Like, what's going on?"
Mhm.
It wasn't. It just wasn't very good. Like, there's
That's
no
where
other way to say it.
it started to drag like a little
Yeah,
bit. So I feel like
and
I
like
can
every
see.
hallway looked the same, and like you don't. It was hard to see. Like, it was hard to visualize in your head. Like, okay, this person's here, that person's there, this person's here. Like, it was just kind of a mess. I thought.
I can feel that getting like noted up a lot to be like, we need to cut this.
Yeah,
Um, but then like they end up cutting the one guy's story about letting it out, and like apparently then like he just kind of disappears from the movie. You know what I
yeah,
mean?
yeah. He
So
does. They completely dropped the plot. And yeah, so
awkward.
I think that the first time they capture him is way better and makes a lot more sense because the second time,
Mhm.
and we're jumping ahead here, we actually skipped over like a huge plot point, but like, so the
Yeah,
second time is just like, I, it's disorientating, but in a very bad way because it's just like, what the hell is going on? Like, like it just kind of seems like everyone's shutting doors, and like, I think also for me, I was just like, are these guys really outrunning the Xenomorph? Like, really? Maybe that was just me, but
yeah,
I was
yeah,
kind of like, I don't know if I'm buying that.
yeah. I think I think generally like both those sequences like weren't too great, but they did
They
have
they
like a
weren't the
couple.
series best, yeah, for sure.
They
But
they had a couple good, like you mentioned, some character moments, and it does lead to like the final moments of Dylan and Ripley, which I think are good. So I think maybe like this they could have either fleshed out the characters more or like combined that into one sequence. And I
yeah,
think there was no way to do that like with the production they had. You know what I mean? Like the way they did it, it was just like, let's
yeah,
smash or cut it down. Whereas I feel like it either needed to be fleshed out more or like reconceptualized, for before they made it.
I think in a perfect scenario, that so I can understand why they cut the first imprisonment with Golek from the theatrical version. I do like it though, but I can understand why they cut it because it's essentially you're doing the same thing twice, like back to back. So I get that. But I think in the perfect scenario, they should have kept that and reworked that into the latter one and then cut the second like trap because it was just like it was very hard to follow what was going on. It wasn't done very well. In the first one, it wasn't like it wasn't like your A material by any means necessary compared to some of the other stuff we've seen in Alien and Aliens, but it was simple, it was effective, and it's like, I understand what they're doing and what they need to do in order to trap this. Where the other one was just kind of like, okay, how many more doors do we got? Like, where are we? What?
You'd have to rework things, but maybe it's like, go look, freeze it, and then you kind of... Because then there's like another build-up to another trapping sequence.
Yeah.
Maybe he frees them and you go like kind of right into the ending part. You know,
yeah,
like you'd have to rework it.
I could get behind that.
And you move the like inspirational speech to before the first time they trap it. Because I did like that little speech that Dylan gave. So you got to move that. But yeah, I think oh, I forgot what I was gonna say. But Golek, I felt like what I liked about it. I remember what I was gonna say. What I liked about it was that I liked how it maintained how all of them were kind of different and like they all responded to the stuff in different ways. And like, so for example, Dylan kind of was trying to find peace with himself through his religion that he's sort of helping foster there.
Right.
Whereas like Golek or whatever, like it sort of showed like how it made him more insane, basically. You know what I mean? He developed this weird god complex. And so I like that. I think that's, I don't know, a more real portrayal of how these things can affect people in different ways, you know?
Yeah. I have a funny story. So I was watching this last night and I had subtitles on, and I thought originally when they introduced Golek that the subtitles were wrong and they were just like, we can't stand the garlic, because there was a scene of him like chomping down on something, and then they said he stinks.
Bad too.
And I was like, is this guy eating too much garlic? What's going on? And then I realized his name was Golek.
It's his wrestling gimmick. He's like, I'm the garlic man.
So another thread that's running through this movie: Ripley does not feel good. She's quite weak. She is something is not right, as you might expect, to be fair, after battling all these aliens and stuff like that. But then she goes back to her crashed ship, and actually, in a very sweet moment, she finds Bishop, the remains of Bishop, and he kind of
this was awesome.
Like, this was great.
I love this thing.
I didn't even really make note of this at all because it kind of wasn't really relevant to the overall plot. But yeah, so she finds Bishop, and you know she really has come a long way since in her initial distrust of androids and stuff like that. And now it's two old friends, and he's asking to be unplugged. It's a very sweet scene, actually. And I think it's like half his head and like his arm or something like that. And he's like, I can't feel my legs.
It was great. He makes a couple of wisecracks, but it doesn't undercut anything.
No, not at all.
You just like really feel for him as a character, and like the effect looked awesome, and then like the milk coming out of his eye.
Ugh.
It feels like this feels like another thing of like where I was talking about the struggle for authority. This feels like, and it's every Alien movie has this, where it's like, well, we have to have all of the things that you remember from Aliens. So we have to have the androids and the milk coming out of their heads, and there's got to be the struggle. But like, I don't know. I think they managed to like do it really well again.
I don't think that it was like unnecessary, or like it didn't feel like it's like, all right, we're just getting our stuff in this movie. It felt
logical, like, because she went and got like useful information from him that she had been trying to get.
Yeah, and so what she was getting from him was the last logs of their escape pod, because he's an android and would have that, and obviously he was killed by the Xenomorph. So that's when they confirm that this is in fact what we're dealing with. It's a very good scene.
Yeah, exactly. So it manages to be like unique, but it do similar things without feeling like, oh, we're seeing them do the same old stuff.
Yeah, I agree with that.
It's a little bit, but not as bad as other franchises, I would say.
I thought it was a nice scene, and it didn't overstay its welcome. It's probably only like a 5-minute scene, and it was kind of a, at least like Bishop got closure, which is perhaps more than Hicks or Newt got, unfortunately.
Yeah.
But anyway, so the story
really
here, the story is that Ripley does not feel good, and she goes and gets herself tested, and wouldn't you know, she is, what's the proper term here? Impregnated? Incubating a...
Well, it's like a parasite, right? So maybe she's infected.
Well, she's got an alien growing inside of her, and not just any alien, but a queen alien. And so Ripley knows that she is as good as done. But it's actually very interesting, because that is the reason why the Xenomorph spared her earlier. So now you kind of have like this different dynamic where Ripley can't be killed by the Xenomorph because the Xeno knows that there's a queen inside of it, and in the interest of self-preservation, they're going to let her live, at least until the queen hatches, of course, which would kill her anyways.
And very I cool. Like it just in the like grand narrative of, I mean, it probably jumps the shark a little bit in the next movie more, but like how much more like essential Sigourney Weaver is to this series. Like it's not just like, oh, because it's like some alien in space. It's like Ripley the character, to the point now where like she's literally like, the last movie she fought the queen, defeat the queen, and they both had like, you know, this thing going on of like their daughters or their children they were protecting, and now she's literally harboring the queen. And then in the next one, I don't know, she gets like powers or something. So like I just like this kind of ongoing like it's just, I don't know, I think it's cool actually, even though it starts to get a little silly.
This is the other moment in this game that sort of kind of reminded me of Metroid a little bit. So Goo, in Metroid Fusion, Samus is attacked by a parasite called the X, and the X live on the planet SR388, and the Metroids, who also live on that planet, used to eat the X, so they would keep them kind of in check, because, you know, the X are very dangerous and can mimic whoever they eat. But Samus kills all the Metroids in one of the Metroid games, so the X are running amok everywhere, and they actually attack Samus, and the only way to save Samus's life is to inject her with Metroid DNA. And so in Metroid Fusion, but particularly in Metroid Dread, you see that Metroid DNA really kind of shape Samus and change Samus, and like she kind of becomes
that crazy
this thing,
suit, right?
Yeah, she kind of becomes this thing that she's fought against, and I was like, okay, same kind of, you know, kind of getting that similar vibe with the alien in here. I like it.
I'm not even like super knowledgeable about Metroid, but I did know enough that literally crossed my mind while watching this. I was like, okay,
yeah,
like, it makes sense. It makes sense to use that. Yeah, I think it's a cool conceit.
So we're gonna jump ahead again. So they've trapped it with that awful scene. They've trapped the Xenomorph, and this thing does not want to go down without a fight. It kills essentially every single prisoner except for Ripley and this other guy. But they get it and they trap it inside this tank, and Dylan is so awesome. I can't wait to talk about Dylan. But so they trap it there and they dump molten lead on top of the Xeno, and even that's not enough to kill this bastard. They have to turn the sprinklers on, which then shatters the Xenomorph. That was pretty cool. I liked that.
Yeah.
Because I think it's like one of the first times you've seen, like, I mean, I guess you saw like a bunch of them gunned down in, you know, Aliens, but like they got rid of the queen by ejecting it into space. They got rid of the first one by ejecting it into space. Like, and this one, they were just like, how are we going to actually like defeat this thing? Because ejecting it into space is not an option.
It was cool. They used like the mining equipment.
Yeah, I like that.
It was like that Hobbit movie when they fought the dragon.
Yeah. So I thought this next scene was like so awesome. So it's also, you know, as we've been talking about, Weyland-Yutani is very interested still in this life form, and still after everything, and they're very interested in Ripley.
That feels like real life.
It does. Yeah, it does. You still haven't seen Don't Look Up, right?
No, yeah, right. But it is that sort of thing. Like, this is gonna kill us all, but we need
how can this benefit us? Yeah.
Yes, yeah.
So Weyland-Yutani is coming for this life form, and it's coming for Ripley as well. And like, They finally arrive on the planet, and Bishop is the lead man, like the lead point man, begging Ripley to come back with him because they know that she has the embryo inside of her. But it's not Bishop, the android. It's Bishop, the dude that the android was based off of. It was very cool because like everything about this guy is different. He talks different. He walks different. His tone is different. It was like very disorientating.
Yeah, I was gonna say it's another like late game swerve.
Yeah,
Like, huh? But I thought it was so cool. And
I loved it.
I mean, I love Lance Henriksen, so like, it was just I don't know. Seeing more of him is delightful. I think.
Yeah, this was fantastic. I was not expecting this like at all, and I popped off big time for it.
That reminded me of AVP also. I don't know if we want to get into that, but he shows up as he's Waylon in that.
Yeah.
And so I guess that's like different in the lore, but I just like this idea of like they find a way to like he's so good, you have to keep bringing him back.
I agree, yeah.
Though I guess they stopped, but I get it. You gotta, chart a new path.
I popped off big time for it. I'm a big fan of Lance, so it was good to see him back. Like you saw him back in that scene that we talked about with like the real Bishop or like the android Bishop, and you're just like that was a nice, great send off. And then he's back again, and it's just like whoa. I thought it was fantastic. And he's begging and he's pleading with Ripley to come back. We're gonna kill that thing inside you, and we can save you. And like Mr. Magoo could see through this deception, right? Like,
yeah.
And Ripley is no fool. She's just like, and she throws herself into the lava. Now, in the theatrical version, as she's falling, the queen bursts out of her chest, which sounds kind of hokey to me. I can't remember.
Yeah, I agree.
In this one, she just falls, and it's like actually quite dignified. Although I will say, the CGI was horrible.
Yeah,
that
was pretty bad.
Laugh out loud, awful.
But I thought the build up to the moment, like as a character moment, it worked really well. Just after, actually, it made even sense to have the alien inside her for that final moment, because it was like now she became like, it was already basically this way anyway, but she became like viewed as property of Weyland-Yutani, you know, and so like her and the alien are one and the same, and really that's how everyone else is really treated, you know what I mean? So I thought like that was really cool too. And just the, after after all she had been through, I mean, it's kind of like poetic and like a beautiful sacrifice on one hand, but it's also really dark because of that, and also just because it came after her losing all these people, and then like this guy she just met who also she was
somewhat close with,
somewhat feelings towards or whatever. So it was just like it is kind of like, dang, that's brutal at the same time,
I thought that this was a really nice send off for Ripley, and it kind of seemed appropriate because like Ripley has been in these scenarios where she's cheated death, where like any normal person would have died like 100 times over, and Ripley kept on cheating death, but she couldn't do it for one last time. And I kind of like that, because I think that like, in Metroid, Ridley, like the dragon, is revived like time after time after time, and it's almost kind of like a joke or whatever. But in this movie, it's like the obstacles were too great. Like you were kind of wondering like how's she going to get out of having this queen inside of her, and the answer was she can't, and nobody can. Mm-hmm. And so she does what any hero would do, and that is, preserve the greater life. So I thought that it was a great send off for Ripley, and as this was happening, I was just like Ripley might be, if not the like one of the greatest action heroes ever. That's kind of what I was thinking as she was falling down. And I know that we're not done with Ripley yet. We still have one more movie of her, but like I thought it was like a great send off for her.
Mm-hmm. This does like, whatever you say about the second one, this one does feel like, okay, it should stop here. But I remember the next one being goofy enough that it might be okay. You know
I
what I mean?
I think that like yeah, the premise is fine. Like we'll talk about that in the new year.
Okay.
But yeah, I love this. So I have a few quick thoughts about some characters. I can go down the list, and you can
Oh yeah.
shout out anything that you think too. Just a couple of stray thoughts, if you will. And we'll start with Ripley, of course. Ripley is so awesome. Like I said, she might be the greatest action hero of all time.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah, and her yeah. Their character through all these movies I think has been what like beyond, there's a lot of great things going on in all these movies, but she's
yeah.
really holding it all together, I think.
Sigourney Weaver is so dialed into that character. She's so consistent and like knows what Ripley would do. Like she's so if they make a Metroid movie, Sigourney Weaver has to be involved somehow,
Yeah.
some way.
Oh yeah.
But yeah,
That'd
so
be
I
awesome.
thought that the scene where going back to the autopsy scene, there's a quick scene where Clemens asks Ripley like, "Are you her mother?" And she says no, and I thought that was actually like very sad for some reason. Like just it kind of
The
shows
way
like
she played it was, yeah,
yeah, like
that was really sad.
I don't know. It just kind of showed the fragility of everything. Like I'm not, but in such a short time, she means a lot to me. So yeah, that was kind of a sad scene. And on the flip side of that, I thought that this scene, the next one, was like hilarious when she's talking to Clemens. She's like, "Are you attracted to me in that way? It's been a long time, you know." I thought that
Well,
was so good.
I was thinking that was funny too, because he asks her, he's trying to figure out what's going on, and then
Yeah.
she does that to change the subject, and then then it moves on to the next thing, and you're like, okay, and then after they get it on, he's like, so anyway, you were deflecting
Yeah.
my question.
I love how he's just like, "Oh, very direct." Like
They had a great, yeah, I loved their back and forth. I thought it was really good.
yeah, I don't know. I loved that scene. I was kind of just like Ripley deserves that. Like she's been through a lot, so good for Ripley. um, so I will say this. I did have a few questions about this queen embryo inside of her. First of all, how
Okay.
was it? How was she impregnated? I mean, I obviously know how
Well,
she had a face hugger inside of her or on her, but.
right.
But I guess because like I don't know if her seal on the ship was broken or not, or
No,
her pod
they
rather.
do show that. Yeah,
they?
yeah, it's a quick shot, so I can see how
Okay.
you miss it, but I believe they go to her pod and they go and there's a little thing on the side of her pod and it's broken and you can see like that it's
Okay.
been melted. And so you're like, ooh, you know.
Okay. So next question. How could she tell that it was a queen inside of her?
Right. Yeah, I
I'm
don't
not
know.
sure. Which
Was
begs
it
to my
from
third question too, which is like, so I don't think the queen is the one that impregnated her. Like, is it random? Like, what facehugger like lays a queen
Mhm.
embryo rather than like a regular one? Like,
Well, I think it makes sense. I think I was at least willing to buy it because she does the scan and we don't get all the details, but maybe like, well, one, is it the queen? Is like the queen the only female alien? Do they talk about that
oh,
in
I
the
don't know
second one?
actually.
Where it's like isn't that similar to like how a beehive is? Don't they make that comparison? Um
That's
so
good.
So my guess is I don't know if they know enough about the aliens to figure this out. Maybe they do, but like maybe from the scan, I was thinking, oh, they probably just figured out, oh, it's female, so it's got to be the queen. They didn't have a line where she says, oh, it's female. It's got to be. They saved it for the reveal, but I was willing to buy it. And then I'm guessing, and again, it's not explained, so this is maybe it's a little bit of headcanon, but I'm guessing she defeated the queen. This alien was like that impregnated her was like the last one, at least as far as it knows. So I think maybe they must have a thing where like, okay, we need a new queen. You know what I mean? Like, or else, like it must be instinctual to propagate because they're all acting. They're animals. They're just trying to repropagate their species. You know what I mean? So I'm thinking it probably was like, all right, well, we're gonna need a new queen. You know, so let's get one cooking.
I could totally buy that. Yeah, I could totally buy that. I fired off a message while you were saying that to our resident alien expert David Laspy. So if he gets back to me
Yeah,
before this
where is
podcast
he?
is
He should be
done,
here.
I'll let you know. But yeah, so that was a question I had about Ripley, and then yeah, just my final thoughts are like Ripley's just like so awesome. Like I feel like I have to say it again. Like she's just so awesome.
Yeah.
So Dylan. So this is the guy that is the leader. I get he's not he doesn't claim to be a leader. He doesn't want to be a leader, but he is the leader of this religion, this cult, and he's
Yeah.
kind of like a pastor. He's kind of a sermon, but he's definitely a badass throughout this whole movie. There's this fantastic scene where Ripley is about to get raped by like several of the prisoners, and Dylan comes in
Horrifying. Yeah.
and beats the piss out of all of them, and it was so awesome. I was like, this can't actually be about to happen, right? And I thought for a second maybe it was, and then like he comes out and I was cheering. I was just like, yeah, Dylan.
Woo!
But
I was like, oh.
I do like that scene that you mentioned earlier where Ripley sits with him, and like, so in this movie, other than Ripley and Clemens, I guess Dylan's probably the closest thing to like a full-on good guy in this movie. Like he's a leader, he's willing to fight the Xeno, he's willing to sacrifice his life. But like he goes out of his way to say like, I am not a good guy. Like I've killed women, I've done terrible things, and like he's like very much like I don't know. I kind of
Well,
I kind of like that.
so what?
Not that he
what
did
I
that,
like-
of course, but like just that he was just like they portrayed him as like a
It was kind of it felt real, I guess.
yeah.
you could say.
Maybe that's what I'm trying to
What-
say.
It reminded me of I want to plug Movies That Whip, which is our side series on virtual theater. But it
Yeah.
reminded me of this movie No Escape that we covered, which is about like someone sent to an island that's like a prison island, and they get it in that they get into what a lot of the characters did, or like why they're there. Do they deserve to be there? Who deserves it? Who can find acceptance? There's a lot of things going on that you would deal with in this situation. This had a similar thing, and part of it was there's this idea with most of them, like we don't know specifically why a lot of them are there. So we like obviously the ones who he saved Ripley from, I think you can draw a lot of conclusions from, but we don't know because we find out there's a push and pull with Clemens, which I thought was really good. Like, why is he here? And you find out that it's because you kind of feel sorry for him. His backstory is he was like a doctor who had to work crazy long shifts, and he got drunk and was called back in, and he prescribed the wrong dosage of medication. He got sent. Does that mean he should be sentenced to work on mining, slave labor on a mining colony? I don't know. So like, there's something going on there, and we don't actually know about Dylan. And I thought that moment was so interesting because it could be true what he says to her, but I also felt like it could be he just believes, like they believe that they need to have no contact with women or whatever, no matter what,
Right.
which I don't think is true. I think well, maybe so. I don't know.
Maybe for some of those guys.
I don't know the answer to like rehabilitate all these people. I can't give you that. But what I thought was interesting was he was saying that. I felt like he was saying that whether maybe it's true, but maybe I think it's him sticking to his beliefs and trying to scare her away. You know what I mean?
That could be true. Yeah.
What I like about it is I don't think we get a scene where he, like Clemens, where he tells his story. You know what I mean?
No,
and
and in fact, the assembly cut has a lot more of Dylan than the theatrical cut. So, like, even what we got in this movie was like a significant upgrade over what people that watch just the base movie get. So yeah, I thought he was great.
That there's a character just like that in No Escape, played by Lance Hendrickson.
Really?
Who
Go figure.
He plays the father. And there's different groups, but he runs this one group, and it's this very wholesome rehabilitative faction on the island. And part of what is there is like for a while they don't know what he did and if he really deserves it, or you know what I mean? Like there is that sort of thing. And I do love obfuscating that because it lets you like look at these characters and like try to judge them not try to judge them, but try to like,
Well, like,
figure out who they are.
you could draw your own conclusions and like what you're willing to look past. And so yeah, so I thought that this scene specifically was very good because like he is, in the context of the story, like he's fairly heroic, but like if what he's saying is true, like he's not a good guy, and like you have to assume everybody there deserves to be there. So it's it was a very interesting scene.
Yeah.
It stuck out to me a lot. The last thing I want to say about Dylan is when he was getting eaten alive by the Xenomorph, he was saucy. He's just like, "Is that all you got?" As he's like getting ripped apart.
Yeah.
It was great.
Awesome.
Total badass.
It was awesome.
Clemens, you mentioned his story. So Clemens, the doctor, was addicted to morphine, got drunk, but was a very promising doctor, but got drunk after a long shift, came back and prescribed tons of wrong medication. A lot of people died, and he was sent to prison. And I was actually kind of expecting his story to be a little bit more sinister than that. Because, like, it kind of seemed, like you said, like, this, like clearly he had addiction problems, but, like, it kind of bordered into, like, first of all, like, why would you let a clearly intoxicated doctor operate? And second, like, I don't know. Well, I felt sorry for him a little bit.
That's why I think it's supposed to break this assumption. It's supposed to challenge your assumption that, like, all these people deserve to be here.
Yeah.
Like, this is where we send bad people and we make them, you know, like, go mine stuff for us.
And he chose to stay there, by the way. He was a prisoner, but he's not anymore. He's a doctor.
Yeah. Yeah, because he found something there, you know, like, I guess he found some purpose there, you know, some meaning.
Tell me if you felt this.
And then he has kind of a senseless death, which is, I guess that's kind of it for some
I wish he would have got to live a little bit longer, but I do, again, I think that added to the theme of this movie, which is disorientation, so I can understand. Tell me if you thought this. I kind of thought, actually right before he died, I kind of thought, like, are they about to pull a fast one on us? Is he injecting her with, like, some bad stuff, and, like, he's actually kind of a bad guy? I kind of thought maybe that's where they were going, and then, like, 2 seconds later, his head got blown off.
Yeah, I can't remember because I had watched it so recently that I remembered his whole deal, but I don't remember thinking that. But yeah, his free. It was scary because he injected her with that stuff, and then the alien shows up, and you're like, that's just like a great. A great moment where you're like, no, this is the worst possible time.
Yeah, it was too bad. I was trying to figure out for like half an hour where I knew him from last night, and it was Game of Thrones. He's in Game of Thrones. Yeah, and he was great in Game of Thrones.
He's literally in like 1,000 things though, so I'm not even gonna say other credits, but this guy, he just has such a memorable.
He has to have been in a Star Trek episode or two, right?
Has he? He feels like a guy, right?
He feels like a guy that might be. He's in the Sandman. Oh, there you go. Actually, you're totally right. I just watched Sandman. Anyways.
Yeah, exactly. He's prolific. 161 credits on IMDb. So.
Yeah, I feel like this this next guy is also like super, super prolific as well. Brian Glover, who plays Andrews. I recognized him from like X-Men First Class. He's a great but he's also been in like 1,000 things, and he was playing Andrews, the warden, and he's kind of like your typical like guy in charge, a little bit of a goof, trying to hang on to authority. I thought he was fine for the very brief time that he was there. Kind of a good foil, and then again, I couldn't believe that he died like when he did.
Yeah, well, he's a little like when he's in there, he feels like kind of like not cartoony, but you know, he feels very like
sort of, yeah,
like menacing or whatever.
Yeah,
he just feels very like and then
he's the typical bad guy in charge.
Yes, and that's why like his henchmen first felt like, oh yeah, he's just some guy following this guy, and then for whatever reason, like once he like has to step into that role, like that character, that's what stuck out to me more. I think it was because of how like plain he seemed in comparison to Brian Glover, to then when he like all of a sudden had to come into his own, like his character like sprung to life for me. And I think it was like those two characters mixing together that really did it.
I can't remember his name, but his nickname is 85, and they call him that because his IQ is 85. And he does seem like rather malleable. Like I noticed that Andrews was always just like, "Isn't that right? 85, not 85, but whatever his name was." And he was like, "Yep." And then like as kind of the movie goes, like he doesn't really have the capacity to stand up to Ripley or to stand up to a lot of other people, except for that one scene where he does tell the prisoners like, "Hey, I'm smart enough not to be a prisoner." But then I really felt bad for him because he's like, this guy is firmly just like, "We'll wait for Weyland-Yutani to come and rescue us and we'll be fine." And he actually probably would have been fine, except he kind of witnesses what's going on with Weyland-Yutani and how corrupt and awful they are, and tries to do something about it and gets shot. He doesn't even get a good Xenomorph death. He gets shot by Weyland-Yutani.
Yeah, I mean, I thought that was a good moment.
Oh, it was a great moment, but you know what I mean? It's just like the company literally took him out instead of by proxy with this alien. It was literally the company.
And he like works for them, right?
Yeah.
So like that's, I don't know, like you really go from just like, I like really cared about his character when he died. And I was like, wait a minute, like I did not expect this. You know, I did not.
I was sad.
Coming.
He was kind of like the Heath Slater of this movie. Like, I got a wife and kids.
Just trying to get that above ground pool.
Yeah. Okay, last character I want to talk about is the Xenomorph itself. Easier for me to say.
Oh yeah.
One thing I really like about this depiction of the Xenomorph is they have like a nickname for it, and they call it the Dragon. I don't know why. I feel like that kind of added to it to me. It kind of like built this one Xenomorph back up and made him a little bit more unique and a little bit more like, kind of like what you were saying earlier, where like there were so many aliens in Aliens that like having this one I felt was like a nice return to form, and like just like giving it a name, even if it's just like something as generic as the Dragon. I was like, okay, like this is kind of cool. I kind of dig this. It felt more like a character. It's somewhat more like a character versus like, you know, the first movie, like that alien is just like a force of nature. It is a character, but not in the same way. Does that make any sense?
Well, I feel like it just because each one it's encountered a totally different group of people, but like you just see like the way they respond to it, and I feel like that gives it so much more character. So in the first one, it's like, you know, people who are like a lot of workers and stuff like that. People are just trying to get the job done, reacting to this. And then in the next one you have like the Queen, and you have like, you know, these guys who are supposed to be like rootin' tootin' tough guys who come undone by this. And now here it's like these guys who are, you know, they're like, they've got this weird cult thing going on, so like they mythologize it a little bit. And then you, like we mentioned, you get the one guy who like starts to think of it as like some sort of deity, you know. So like it has like this mythic element to it.
So I do, like I mentioned earlier, I thought that the CGI was for the most part better on the Xenomorph. And I do think that it like, I thought it was actually very interesting to see the Xenomorph interact with something that like it didn't want to kill when it went up against Ripley. Like I thought that was pretty cool actually, because like every time you ever see it, it's just like, well, someone's dead. And yeah, it was interesting to see it in that environment.
I feel like in the second one they did this with the Queen and like Ripley threatening it, where it's different, but I feel like they both kind of added to sort of the mythology of it. But for the purpose of the movie, you know, and it didn't feel like we're just like dropping in a bunch of stuff senselessly. So it both like gave sort of that world and those creatures more character without like totally spilling all the beans, you know?
Yeah, I agree with that. So all in all, Alien 3 is regarded as not a very good Alien movie. But I like really dug it, actually. Like I really did.
Too.
Like much more than I thought I was going to. I do think, like, again, I think that it is a little bit cheap that Newt and Hicks died off screen, but I think if you can get past that and realize it does serve a purpose, like there's a pretty cool movie here. And like, yeah, there's some weird parts and some bad CGI, but like I kind of dig this movie a lot, actually.
It's certainly not as pristine. Like the first two, I feel like really, really stand. They're timeless or whatever. And this one, I don't know. I still think it's really good. I still think it's really good, despite not being like the other two. I feel like you throw up into the conversation of like all-time great movies. You know what I mean? Whereas this one, I feel like, yeah, this is a great movie. It's a great movie. I really enjoyed it. I really thought it was unique and interesting. I wouldn't go to bat for it to say it's like the greatest of all time, but I think it's really
No, but I don't think it's like awful. I don't think that at all.
Yeah, no.
I have an update for you, Goo. I have an update. I got an answer.
Okay.
Ripley encountered a royal face hugger, which is capable of impregnating two targets. One with a queen embryo, one with a regular embryo. So the face hugger got Ripley with the queen, and then the ox with the regular xenomorph. So, quote, most notably, a royal facehugger is capable of impregnating at least two separate victims, and these facehuggers do not die until both the embryos have been implanted. Exactly how long a royal facehugger can survive after planting is unknown, but blah, 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 blah. So that
is not explained in the movie.
Nope.
No, I think my leap of logic I like better.
I kind of do too. It never even crossed my mind actually that this thing must have laid two embryos. I kind of thought maybe there were just two of them.
I that's what I would believe too, actually. But I don't know if they specify that, but whatever. I do like that. Reminds me, love the scene when they find the face hugger and they're like, "What the hell is this?"
Is this a squid? No, dude, run! So I'm not gonna say Alien 3. I'm not gonna put it on the same level as Aliens or especially Alien, but I think that like for a entry in this series that is much maligned, I think it's like definitely worth watching. Specifically the cut that we watched, the assembly cut. I don't know about the theatrical one. That seems a little bit more I don't know, hokey pokey, but yeah. I think that this one is good.
It big time.
Yeah. Okay. Anything else you want to add about Alien 3 before we get out of here, Goo? We've been going for a while, so.
No, I thought it was really good.
I think we got everything we can out of Alien 3, and I can't wait. Goo and I will return for Alien Resurrections. I'm stoked about that. I can't wait for that one because that's the last one that I haven't seen in a long time, and the premise is insane. So I think it's going to be a great time.
Basketball, Winona Ryder.
I can't wait. I have I shouldn't say I had. I probably still had such a crush on Winona Ryder when I was a lad. I still like Winona Ryder. She's great.
Yeah, she's amazing.
Goo, thanks for coming on.
Yeah, thanks for having me. This is a lot of fun.
Omega Metroid listeners, make sure that you check out Virtual Theater, the podcast about video game movies and the stories that shape them. If you like this analysis, man, we do this for so many different movies, like tons of different movies, shows, and everything like that. So go hit us up. And if you got an extra $1 per month to spare, you can get bonus shows that revolve around the Zelda cartoon, Captain N, and Banana Slamma, the Donkey Kong Country animated series. So you know that's $1 well spent. But for now, we are going to get out of here. Of course, we want you to check us out over on Twitter. You can check me out at Spiteri316. Goo is at Gooey Fame. Virtual Theater is at Virtual Theater X, and we are at Omega Metroid Pod. Check us out wherever you get your podcasts. Like, subscribe. Check out OmegaMetroid.com for all of your Metroid needs. And we will see you back here next week. Take care, everybody.